Hi there, this is Ronnie here, Amber's Night, giving you my top 5 RPGs. This list is very subjective. Um, I'm sure there'll be a fair few people who will wonder, WTF, but it's my list. Um, People are free to agree and disagree as they feel fit. There will be a few notable exceptions, sort of mentions at the end, but here are my top 5, and at number 5 is Palladium Fantasy Role-Playing Game. I actually played that game long before I ever played AD&D or Rollmaster. It was the first time I'd seen a fantasy game beyond basic Dungeons and Dragons, which was the fantasy game I used most then, that allowed for race and class. Now that's pretty much standard fare, but it was the first time I'd seen it. I loved the game system. It was pretty much the same as D&D if you really get down to it. But I've always preferred Palladium. I liked the darker edge to it. I liked the fact that it was a little more mature in its ideology and its setting. And it's just always been, for me, a better fantasy game than D&D. I think the only negative on it is the fact that they gave you all these rules for everything else, but didn't give us a character sheet, except for one of the supplements actually had some character sheets in it. But that aside, I think it's a great game. Not really a beginner's game, but a good game nonetheless. And in fourth place, dun dun dun, Pendragon. I love Arthurian legend. I always have. This game is very much based on Mallory's Morte d'Arthur and T.H. White's The Once and Future King. I love the epic scale of the game, the fact that it's assuming that not only will you be playing your first character, but you'll be playing the offspring of that character and possibly the offspring of that character as it goes through the before, during and after the time of Arthur. Character generation, I think, is superb, given that you really are expected to deal with background, birth order, where you were born, when you were born, how you were, finding out your life before you were even conceived almost. And it's only in the very last stages do you actually do what most character sheets do right from the bat, which is to roll your stats. The game system itself employs only a d20 for skill resolution and a d6 for combat damage and so on. And I think it's a perfectly good, solid fantasy system. It still remains my favourite fantasy system. And I think Chaosium did a fantastic job of it. And in third place, we have Star Wars D6 version. That is the first edition I have there, and I got that in 1987 from a friend of mine, and I love it. I think it captures the speed, the freewheeling fun of the original trilogy perfectly. The system is very simple, but it works. It works for the game. There's a minimal of bookkeeping involved. It just gets on with the action, the fun, revving up the drama. I would also say it's one of the best beginners games I've ever seen. I will make a video about beginners games very soon, but I think it's a wonderful beginners game and I would recommend it highly. And it's just fantastic fun. And in second place, runner-up, da-da-da-da-da, Cult. This is the first edition of the game from Metropolis Limited, and I think it's the best horror game out there. I've played White Wolf, the Vampire the Masquerade. I had a very bad experience with it, I must admit. I could do a video on that actually. And I've played Call of Cthulhu, which I love, but it hasn't made my top 5. It does make my little notable at the end. But I think it's the best horror game I've ever come up against. Very, very dark. Not a game for kids or even younger teenagers. I mean, I have a strict policy of never playing that with anyone. Excuse me. With anyone under the age of 18. I think it's superb. Very simple system. In fact, it only uses a 20-sided die. That's right, it's a D20 game before the D20 system came out. Uses a D20 for everything, for skill resolution to combat, to damage resolution. Everything works off a 20-sided die. Very simple system. Character generation is a little involved because there's an awful lot of skills that you can choose from, but it's a point-buy system, so it's fairly simple to use. And yes, I'm seriously considering at the moment using Cult, using the rule set and making some amendments to run a game set in the world of the TV series True Blood, which I've been asked to do by a couple of friends. It's an interesting challenge, and I'm looking forward to finally sort of getting that sorted, because I think the game system and I think the speed of it and the simplicity of it will work in its favour. And number 1, sitting in a folder because it's long since lost its spine, but number 1 is Castle Falkenstein from Artelsorian. I bought this game in about 94, 93, 94, something like that. And it's been pretty much my main system since. Beautifully simple system. It doesn't have a character sheet in the traditional sense. What you have is a journal that you keep, and that journal updates all your statistics and so on. Because all your statistics, they do have a numerical value, but they also have a actual name value. You know, you are average, or you are poor, or you are exceptional at things. And your journal becomes your character sheet, and by the end of it, by the time you actually retire your character, or the character dies, you will have had an entire story in your character sheet. And it's great for getting ideas from as well. The rule system itself is very light, gets on with actual role playing, which is why I love it so much. And it uses playing cards, standard pack of playing cards rather than dice for task resolution. Very simple, very rules light, barely need to look at a book. And I love it. I find it very easy to make games for. The Victorian steampunk high fantasy setting just leaps ideas off the page, and I love it. And I like the system so much, I have considered using the rule system for other games. I am considering using it to run Star Wars. As much as I enjoy the D6 version, I'd love to give Star Wars Falkenstein a go, because I think the rules would suit it beautifully. So that's my top 5. If it were to go to a top 10, I think I would add the following 5 games in no particular order. Nephilim by KSM, which is one of those great backgrounds, what the hell do you do with it games. I love it though. You get some wonderfully well-rounded, exceptionally epic characters out of it. I would also add Tomb by Steve Jackson Games simply because it's a riot, and sometimes it's a great way of just letting off steam. I would also add Space Master by Iron Crown Enterprises. Um, a lot of people prefer Traveller because it's a little simpler to handle than ICE's table for everything mentality, but I've always preferred Space Master. I think it allows for a greater degree of flexibility and a greater degree of individuality in characters, and I like that. And the other two that would probably be my 7 and 6, I'm not sure which, are obviously Castle Focus, like Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium. Love the game, I really do. I've used it a lot, I genuinely love it. It's just I love using those other games more, particularly Cult, when it comes to horror games. And basic D&D, and by basic I mean the 1985 Red Box and then the Expert, Companion and Master sets that came after it. It's how I started. And whilst it isn't the best system in the world, I think it's a great beginner's system. Again, I'm going to do a video on that. And I just think it's a great intro for RPGs in general and fantasy gaming especially. And if people were to ask me what game would I put up there as a good game for a beginner to have, I would almost be tempted to say try and find it, because it's a good way to start. So yes, that's my top 5. I plan to do more of these videos on various ideas for gaming in general. So feel free to comment, and we'll talk again soon.